I want you to do something before I start. The next time you're sitting in a room and you're looking at a screen, a phone, a monitor, a television, I want you to think about the camera mounted somewhere in the corner of whatever building you're in right now. The one above the ATM, the one in the parking garage, the one in the lobby of the office where you work. Think about whether anyone is watching that feed. Think about whether you'd know if they were. Think about whether the person on the other end of that camera is actually who you think they are. Because for 14 months, I was that person. I was the one watching. And then something started watching back. My name is Marcus Delgado. I'm 31 years old. I work night shift security at Hargrove Business Park in Elko, Nevada, and what I'm about to tell you I have documented as carefully as I can. I have the access logs. I have the camera footage, or what's left of it. I have photographs I took inside the building. And I have the understanding, arrived at slowly over many weeks, that something was in that building with me every night, and that it looked exactly like me. Elko is the kind of town that people pass through on I-80 without stopping. High desert, wide flat sky, a few casinos on the main strip, a Walmart, a handful of diners that stay open late for the truckers. The kind of place where the population hasn't changed much in 30 years, and everybody has a cousin who works at the gold mine east of town. I'd ended up there after a back injury doing warehouse logistics in Reno. A friend of a friend mentioned the security job. $17 an hour, night shift, mostly sitting. My back needed mostly sitting. I took it. Hargrove Business Park was 3 connected commercial buildings on the eastern edge of town. Building A housed a medical billing company. Building B was about 30% occupied, a regional logistics firm on the 2nd floor, a dental insurance company on the 3rd. Building C was entirely vacant. Had been vacant for 8 months before I started. Some company had relocated to Reno and nobody new had moved in. 3 buildings, maybe 400,000 square feet total, and at night it was just me. So if you are new here, make sure to subscribe this channel. And if you've been watching but haven't subscribed yet, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. There's a lot more content coming your way. Drop a comment. I read every single one. My station was a room on the ground floor of Building A, 12 by 14 feet. 1 long desk along the wall. 16 monitors arranged in a 4x4 grid, each showing a different camera feed. Parking lot, lobby, stairwells, elevator interior. Every hallway on every floor. The desk had a computer running Sentinel View, which was the security software. It controlled the camera feeds and logged all keycard access events throughout the buildings. Every door with a card reader logged every swipe. Time, date, card number, which door. Clean, simple record keeping. My keycard was on a lanyard I wore. Blue plastic, my name printed on it. A photo that made me look like someone had taken it mid-sneeze. Card number C0041. It opened every door in all 3 buildings. I'd come in at 10 each night, do a handoff with the day's shift operator, a quiet older guy named Phil who always had a crossword folded in his breast pocket, and then I'd be alone until 6. I'd do 2 walkthroughs per shift, one around midnight and one around 3. Between them I'd sit at the monitors, drink coffee, read. I got back into reading during those months. History mostly. True crime. The kind of books that fill up the silence without demanding too much. The chair squeaked when you leaned back. The space heater in the corner kicked on at midnight when the building's HVAC cut off for the night. The monitors hummed. Those were the sounds of the job. I knew them so well I stopped hearing them. The first 4 months were completely uneventful. I want to be clear about something before I go further. I'm not a person who jumps to conclusions. I'm not someone who believes in things he can't explain. My first instinct when something strange happens is to find the boring explanation, equipment fault, human error, something I overlooked. I held on to that instinct for longer than was probably sensible. I want you to know that, because the things I'm going to describe are the kind of things that are easy to dismiss when someone else says them, and I dismissed them myself for a long time before I stopped being able to. The first incident was in late October. I was at the monitors around 1 in the morning, reading a book about the Donner Party. I remember that detail clearly because of how inappropriate it felt afterward. I looked up at the monitors the way you do when you're not really looking, just checking. Camera 11 was the second-floor hallway of Building B. 60 feet of corridor, fluorescent lights off for the night. Those generic mountain landscape prints on one wall, the frosted glass doors to the logistics office at the far end. There was a figure at the far end of the hallway, just standing there, facing the camera. My first thought was simple: someone's in the building. It happens. Employees come back late. Cleaning crews get their nights mixed up. I announced myself on the intercom. "This is security. If there's anyone in Building B, please make your way to the main lobby," and went to investigate. I walked through the connecting corridor, up to the second floor, down the hallway. Nobody there. Frosted glass doors locked. Hallway empty. I reviewed the footage when I got back. The figure had stood at the end of that hallway for about 90 seconds. Then it had simply stopped appearing on the feed, which coincided with when I'd gotten up to investigate. I checked the access logs. No keycard had been used. No door had opened. Phil looked at the clip the next morning. He said it was probably a loop, old footage ghosting over the live feed. It happened with the Sentinel view system sometimes, apparently. He put in a ticket with the IT contractor. The IT guy came in, looked at the hardware, said he didn't see a problem but would monitor it. That was the end of it. For about 2 weeks. The second incident was different in a way that I have spent a significant amount of time trying to find a rational explanation for, and have not found one. It was a Thursday night, around 2:30 in the morning. I just refilled my coffee. I was going through some access log reports that corporate had asked me to compile. Routine documentation. I looked up at the monitors. Camera 7 was the stairwell camera for Building A, between the first and second floors, positioned above and to the side, looking down at the landing and the staircases in both directions. There was someone on the landing, wearing a gray zip-up hoodie, dark jeans, white sneakers. I looked down at myself. Gray zip-up, dark jeans, white sneakers. I sat very still for a moment. The figure on the monitor was standing on the landing, facing up toward the camera. The build was similar to mine. The height looked right, and the way it was standing. I have a slight habit of putting my weight on my left leg when I'm standing still, a thing I'd never thought about consciously until I saw it from the outside. I stood up slowly from my chair, keeping my eyes on monitor 7. The figure on the monitor did not stand up. It remained on the landing, completely still. I walked to the stairwell. Empty. Both directions, nothing. I came back and rewound the footage. The figure had been on that landing for 4 minutes. 4 minutes of standing still, looking up at the camera. Then it had walked, slowly, unhurried, up the stairs toward the second floor door and disappeared from frame. I checked the access log for the stairwell door. No entry. I sat in that chair for a long time without reading my book. At 6 in the morning when Phil came in, I gave him a vague debrief. I said there'd been another possible loop incident. I didn't tell him about the clothes. I drove home and sat in my apartment with the lights on. After that, I started watching the monitors more carefully, not glancing up periodically, actually watching. I repositioned my reading material below the screen level so I could monitor both at once. A week after the stairwell incident, I saw the figure again. Camera 14, the third-floor hallway of Building B. This time it was moving, walking slowly away from the camera, down the long corridor toward the far end. Same gray hoodie, same dark jeans. But what stopped me was the walk. I have a gait that my sister used to make fun of when we were kids. Slightly turned out on the right foot, a very faint roll in the left shoulder. It's subtle. I'd never thought much about it. Watching it from behind on a security monitor at 2 in the morning was the strangest experience of my life to that point. The figure turned a corner into a side corridor and disappeared. I went up. The side corridor was a dead end. 4 locked office doors and a wall. Nothing there. But there was something on the floor at the end of the corridor. A coffee cup lid. White plastic, convenience store style, the snap-on kind with the small flip-top opening. Identical to the lids from the Maverick station on 5th Street, where I bought coffee 3 or 4 times a week. The building had cleaning service on Wednesdays. This was a Friday. The corridor had been cleaned 2 days prior. The lid was in the center of the hallway, not near any door, not against a wall. I put it in an evidence bag from the security kit, wrote the date and location on the outside. I didn't know what I was going to do with it. I just couldn't make myself leave it there. The access log entry happened about 10 days after that, and it's the part one keep coming back to. I was reviewing the previous night's logs at the start of my shift. Standard review. I noticed an access event I didn't recognize. At 11:47 p.m., card number C0041 had been used to access the elevator in building B.C0041 was my card. I pulled my lanyard out and looked at it. My card, still there, still clipped on. I pulled up the elevator camera footage for 11:47. The elevator interior camera was mounted in the upper corner of the car. The footage showed the elevator doors opening on the ground floor. A figure stepped in. Gray hoodie, dark jeans. The elevator went to the third floor. The figure stepped out and turned right. I was at my desk at 11:47. I know this because my log shows a routine check note at 11:40 and another at 11:50. I am on shift in those notes. The figure in the elevator is time-stamped 11:47. My card is in my pocket. The log says my card opened that elevator. I spent the next 2 hours working through every explanation I could reach. The most plausible was a clone card. RFID skimming. Someone had gotten close enough to copy my card's signal without me noticing, made a duplicate, and was using it to access the building on my shift. Dressed like me, moving like me. A real person with a real reason I hadn't figured out yet. I filed a detailed incident report. Included the log entry, the camera footage, the timestamps. Emailed it to my supervisor, Karen, who worked out of the corporate office in Las Vegas. Marked it urgent. She called me the next afternoon. She said the access log was likely a ghost entry, a known Sentinel View bug where the system sometimes logged phantom swipes in low traffic overnight periods. Something to do with the card readers sending idle signals. IT had been aware of it for months. She said the footage was inconclusive. She'd have the elevator card reader looked at. She said if I saw anything physically suspicious to call the Elko County Sheriff. That was the end of that conversation. Over the following 2 weeks, I started noticing something that's harder to articulate than specific incidents. The figure was appearing 3 to 5 times per shift. Not every shift, maybe 4 out of 7. Always between midnight and 4. And it moved through the buildings in a way that I can only describe as considered. It didn't wander. It moved like someone who knew the space well and had a destination. But here's what was wrong with it. I knew where the blind spots were. Every security operator learns the gaps in their system. Camera 12 in Building B's ground floor lobby had a column that blocked about 8 feet of floor space near the east wall. Camera 3 in Building A's parking level had a support pillar with a shadow zone. The stairwell between floors 2 and 3 had a landing angle that wasn't well covered. The figure never went into those areas. It moved along corridors in ways that kept it continuously visible. Not performing for the cameras, it rarely looked at them directly, but it stayed in frame in the covered zones, as if it had studied the layout and knew exactly which areas I could see. An ordinary intruder avoids cameras. This thing stayed on them. And one night, while I was watching it move down the second floor corridor of Building B, it stopped, turned slowly, and looked directly at camera 11. Not up at it, not a casual glance, but at the lens with the particular precision of someone who knows exactly where a camera is mounted and has decided to look at it. Then it walked around a corner and was gone. I sat with my pen in my hand for a long time. I increased my walk thrusts. 4, sometimes 5 per shift. Systematic. Every floor, every stairwell, every corridor. I checked window latches. I checked utility closets. I checked the third floor of Building B more times than I could count. One night, I tried to get ahead of it. I saw the figure on camera 9, the east stairwell entrance of Building B, at approximately 1:15. Based on the direction it was moving, I calculated where it was heading. Instead of going to that location, I ran as quietly as I could to a different position in Building B that gave me a line of sight to its likely path. I stood in the dark hallway off to the side and waited. 10 minutes. Nothing. When I reviewed the footage afterward, the figure had appeared on camera 11. The the main second-floor corridor, about 4 minutes after I'd left the security room. It had walked down the corridor, turned the corner, come to within approximately 20 feet of where I'd been standing, then stopped, stood still for about a minute, and turned around and went back the way it came. I watched that clip 4 times. I thought about it the entire drive home. If it had turned around because of coincidence, it could have turned around anywhere in the building. It turned around at the specific point where it would have seen me if I'd still been standing there, which meant either it could hear me, or it could see me by some means I hadn't accounted for, or it knew where I was because it had access to information about my location in real time. Building C still had a small security terminal operational, a desk, a monitor, an older computer in the old security office off the main lobby. The building was vacant but still part of the Hargrove property, so a few cameras there were still active and feeding into the same Sentinel View network. I hadn't paid much attention to that room since my initial walkthrough when I'd first started. If someone had logged into that terminal and was watching the same feeds I was watching, they would know exactly where I was at every moment. They could see when I stood up, when I left the security room, which direction I headed. They would have a perfect map of my movements in real time. The next night, I went to Building C. Empty buildings have a specific quality that occupied buildings don't. Not frightening, exactly. More like depressive. The carpet that was good quality once. The lobby with the ghost impressions on the wall where the company logo letters had been removed. Doors standing open into dark offices with nothing in them. The smell of a space that's been sealed for months. The old security office was just off the main lobby. Small room, old desk, older monitor, a computer I hadn't looked at since my first week. The computer was on. The screen was in its power save dim mode, but it wasn't off. When I moved the mouse to clear the dim, the screen showed the Sentinel View login page for just a moment, but in the fraction of a second before the system fully refreshed, I caught a glimpse of what had been on screen before it timed out. For camera feeds in a quad view: Camera 7, Camera 9, Camera 11, Camera 14, the stairwell, the east stairwell entrance, the second floor hallway, the third floor hallway, the 4 cameras where I'd seen the figure. Someone had logged into this terminal, set it to display exactly those 4 feeds, and had either stepped away or let the session time out. They had been watching the same cameras I was watching. They had been watching me watch the cameras. They had known in real time where I was and where I wasn't. I called the Elko County Sheriff's non-emergency line. A deputy named Trevino came out. He walked the building with me. He noted the terminal, took a report, found no one in the building, found no sign of forced entry anywhere. He said it was possible a former employee or contractor with retained access was using the space. He recommended I escalate to management and consider rekeying the cards. I sent another email to Karen, more detailed, included Deputy Trevino's report number. She said she'd look into it. I want to be precise about where I was at this point. I wasn't sleeping well. I'd started going over the footage in my memory during the day, replaying the figure's movements, working through the geometry of it. I was keeping a notebook. The notebook was getting thick. My friend Danny, who I sometimes met for breakfast after my shift, told me I seemed different. I gave him a vague version of things. He said it sounded like someone was messing with me. Probably a prank. He said I should quit. I didn't quit, partly because I needed the money, partly because I felt that if I left without understanding what was happening, not understanding would follow me. The not knowing felt worse than staying. The figure kept appearing. The access logs kept showing ghost entries for card C0041. I kept walking the buildings. I kept finding nothing. And then there was the last night. A Wednesday in mid-November. Cold outside the way Elko gets cold in November. High desert cold, dry, and absolute. I came in at 10, did my handoff with Phil, settled in. Nothing unusual in the first 2 hours. Around 2 in the morning, the figure appeared on camera 14. Third floor hallway of Building B. Walking slowly away from the camera, the same gray hoodie, the same slightly turned out gait that I couldn't stop recognizing as my own. It reached the center of the corridor and stopped, turned around, faced the camera. I'd seen it look at a camera once before, briefly. This was different. It stood there, directly facing camera 14, and didn't move. I counted. Almost 90 seconds. Perfectly still, looking at the lens, looking at me. Then it raised one hand, slowly, pointed to something off to its left, the east wall of the corridor. I got up, took my flashlight, went to building B and up to the 3rd floor. The east wall of the main corridor had the standard framed prints, the mountain landscapes, evenly spaced. There was a gap where one had been removed. The outline was still visible on the wall, the hanging hardware still there. The frame itself was gone. Inside that rectangular outline, on the bare wall, someone had drawn in black marker a grid, 16 squares, arranged 4 by 4. The monitors in my security room, all 16 of them, the exact arrangement, the exact proportions, drawn from memory with enough accuracy that I recognized it immediately. One square had an X through it. 2nd row, 4th from the left, monitor 12. I stood in front of that wall for a long time with my flashlight. Then I went back downstairs. Monitor 12 showed camera 12. Building B, ground floor lobby. The camera with the column blind spot. The 8-foot shadow zone near the east wall that the lens couldn't reach. I sat down at my desk and looked at monitor 12. The lobby, the column, the darkness beyond it. The place the camera couldn't show me. And I understood, slowly, the way understanding arrives when you've been resisting it for a long time. That for weeks I had been going to the places the figure appeared on camera. Going to the corridors and the stairwells and the dead-end hallways it had led me to. Moving through the building in the direction of every lit corridor, every visible feed, every monitored zone. I had never once gone to the places the cameras couldn't see. I had been looking at exactly what I was being shown. I sat in that chair and did not move until 6 a.m. Phil knocked on the security room door, came in, poured his coffee, looked at the monitors the way he always did, quick scan, settled in. Quiet night, he said. I looked at monitor 12. Yeah, I said. Quiet. I quit 2 weeks later. Gave proper notice, finished my shifts, didn't tell anyone the real reason. I said I'd found something with better hours. I still have the notebook. I still have the evidence bag with the coffee cup lid. I still have the photographs I took of the diagram on the 3rd floor wall. 16 squares in a 4 by 4 grid. 15 empty, 1 with an X. I've looked at those photographs more times than I can count. I've thought about what the diagram means. Whether it was a warning or an invitation or a demonstration. Whether it was telling me to look at the blind spot or telling me something had been there all along. I've thought about what it means that whoever drew it knew the layout of my security room well enough to map it from memory. Knew which monitor corresponded to which camera. Knew where the gap was. I've thought about the clone card theory, the intruder theory, the psychological explanation. I've turned all of them over many times. None of them account for everything. The card's still in my pocket. The terminal in building C set to exactly those 4 cameras. The thing that turned around at the precise point where I'd been standing. I've thought about the blind spots. About the fact that the figure moved for weeks through camera coverage and never once entered the zones the system couldn't see. About what that means for what was in those zones. There's one other thing. About a week before I quit, I was doing a late walkthrough of Building A, ground floor. I passed the long mirror near the east stairwell. One of those full-length mirrors that offices install near restrooms for no obvious reason. I glanced at my reflection the way you do. And for just a moment, I want to be careful about this. I want to be precise. For just a moment, my reflection looked back at me from a slightly different angle than I was standing. I stopped, looked directly at the mirror. My reflection straightened and looked directly back. And I stood there in that corridor and I genuinely could not determine with any certainty which one of us had moved first. I'm writing this at my kitchen table. The evidence bag is on the counter. The photographs are in front of me. The notebook is open. I haven't been back to Elko. I don't know if what was in that building is still there. I don't know if it was ever only there. It's 11:47.